Hi, I'm Kristen. So some of you know I got the Moxie Longarm like August-ish, September last year, I'm not sure. Anyway, so it's not brand new, but so I've done a few quilts on it, a number of quilts on it now, but not an expert yet. But there's something that I had in my head that I wanted to do before I bought this, or that I wanted to do with it when I had bought it. You know what I mean? Anyway, that I haven't done yet, and I'm going to start it today. So basically what I want to do is a quilt-as-you-go, sort of make it up as you go along, random scrap quilt on the long arm. So I want to piece it on here. So I've got a backing loaded, which is a king size sheet. Why am I doing the king size? I don't know. It just fancied doing. Another thing I fancied doing was like a really big quilt, and I haven't pieced a king size quilt top, so why not? We'll see how this goes. Obviously, if I hate it halfway through, I can cut the whole thing off and make it something smaller. But anyway, that's what we have. We have a king size sheet, flat sheet, loaded up as the backing. We have batting loaded up, but there's no quilt top loaded because I'm just going to piece it on the long arm. So I've got the square feet from, I'll try and get a screenshot or something, a square foot, or I'll take a picture, square foot of the HandiQuilter. They've got 2 square feet. I'm using the smallest one that gives you like a 1/4 inch seam. So I've seen people do it where they use that to sort of line up and do their stitch. So you can still stitch things right sides together and flip them open and then quilt. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do them all like that or what. There's loads of different ways you can do it. So you might have seen people, you know, you could obviously do a strip pieced quilt and then put like a piece of fabric down and fold the edges under. I've seen people do it where they do raw edges and then they couch around it. I don't think I'm going to do that way, but anyway, I'm going to do a bunch of different things. I'm just going to have fun. I will probably somewhat color coordinate it. That's what I'm going to do next, is kind of go through what I have the most scraps and bits of fabric that I want to use up of. I think it's blue. Pretty sure my blue bin's overflowing. And then see what other kind of colors and things might go with that. And then just have a play. So we'll see. Big scrap quilt experiment. We'll see how it goes. Okay, fabric. So I did sort through all my blues. I put them into kind of different shades of blue. The biggest pile was the navy, sort of dark blue, which was what I started with. But spoiler alert, that's not where we ended. So my first go at doing this wasn't super successful. So I'm going to show you super sped up what I tried first, which was to kind of stitch and flip all these small little bits, put almost like a different quilting design in every little scrap. And it was just a bit too time consuming, and I wasn't loving how it was looking. It was possibly, if I'd done a whole quilt in this, it might have looked cool, but I just wasn't feeling it. So I was trying to persist with it long enough for like a whole pass, you know, like a whole throat space wide on the quilt, but I don't think I even got that far. I just decided that I was gonna call time on that particular method, and then I basically just stitched a straight line across the quilt and then started with a whole other method after that. So for my second go, I decided to do more of the strip quilt approach. So I'm doing right sides together and stitching with the 1/4 inch on the foot. I've got the manual channel locks, those little white circles that go over the wheels of the Moxie to keep my lines straight. And I'm basically stitching and flipping and then top stitching. I'm going to show you closer up in a minute, so don't worry about that. My camera angles get better as we go along. Anyways, but obviously a jelly roll strip is not going to cover the entire width of the quilt. So I also took some bigger pieces and decided to quilt some more design, in this case, just straight line quilting. But as I got through the quilt, I did different designs in these larger bits of fabric and then applique on top of them. So I cut out some pieces from the fabric. If you saw my video on the fabric samples, I cut out some of the floral designs on that and used them as appliques for this quilt. Most of the applique on the quilt, I didn't even use a fusible on the back. I just laid it down and kind of lifted the foot to get it over the edges, went around a few times. So it's definitely raw edge. It's definitely going to fray. I'm aware of that. I think that's okay. I also tried in different places on the quilt a bit of trapunto, a bit of layering fabric and cutting things away. I just tried a whole bunch of different things with the applique. But this is basically how most of it was done, was these strips. So this is like the last pass of the quilt, I think, where I finally figured out how to record properly so you could see what I was doing. So I'm doing right sides together. At this point, I'm using strips that are not jelly roll strips. They're things I've just cut down, hacked away. So they're not necessarily perfectly cut and they're not long enough. So when I get to the point where there's a raw edge, you can see I'm adding another strip and I've folded the raw edge under and sort of slipped that underneath. And then I'm going to stitch over it and go to the end. And then when we come back, I'll stitch that down. So you can kind of see with the other strips to the left there, some of them look good, some of them a bit messy. So this is not a tutorial, guys, right? This is me experimenting and taking you along with me. So I wouldn't necessarily do everything that I'm doing here again if I was doing another quilt like this. And I am going to do a part 2 to Quilt-As-You-Go on the long arm. I've already started another one that's more like using the raw edges and being a bit more modern with it. Because this quilt, I mean, I was using the tweeest fabric. This is like the fabric that I never go to, that I never pull out, all the flowers, all the everything. So while I was making it, I was like, what am I doing? I'm not even going to like this quilt. I did like it in the end. So I hope you'll stick around to see what it turned out like. But when I was putting the fabrics together, I was not sure at all. So anyway, that's me stitching. So I stitched basically along the folded edge and then the other strip where the raw edge was. That's me finding out I hadn't flipped over enough there. So I'm going to I put a patch on there in the end. But anyways, I'm top stitching down just to make it a bit flatter. And that's basically all the quilting I was doing on the strips. So it was just where they got joined and then that sort of top stitched line. This was me going back, I think, just to secure that little bit that wasn't caught properly, but I still did put a little bit of an applique on top of that in the end. So because this was the end of the quilt and I was literally running out of pieces that were the size I had been working with, which were mostly 2.5-inch strips and larger chunks where I was putting the applique. This is me adding little tiny bits just to fill up this last throat space on the quilt. But the method I'm using is pretty much the same as what I used throughout the quilt. So I'm just folding over the raw edge, under the raw edge. Looks like it's over because it's right sides together. Sewing at the 1/4 inch, again, using those channel locks, and then flipping it back down. And then I just sort of shifted it one stitch to get in the right position to kind of top stitch down where that fold is, and then do it again on the other folded edge down to the end there. So I hope that makes sense. If I had planned out the quilt a bit more ahead of time, I might have done the stitch and flip with all of the longer strips and then not turned over the edges at the end all the time and just used one strip to sort of turn over and cover all the raw edges in one go, like I kind of did in this photo here. I hope that kind of makes sense. I managed to do that in a couple places, like in this photo, but in general, I was going a bit too fly by the seat of my pants to be able to plan that in advance. So I did all of this slightly tedious folding over. So I'm not sure, again, that this is a method that I would necessarily repeat. You see me stitching off of the strips there. That's so that I've got enough room to put the next strip on, come back, stitch down, and keep going. So there are a fair amount of traveling stitches, but on the back it actually doesn't look that strange. I used the bobbin thread coordinates with the sheet colors, my backing fabric color essentially, and it really didn't turn out looking that strange. I was a bit worried about what the traveling stitches were going to be looking like, but that's what I'm doing when you see me kind of stitching off to the side where there isn't anything that I'm attaching. That's the point of that. Other things, sort of how I approached the whole thing really was to limit myself in colors. So I stuck to this kind of aqua blue, mostly the light pink, but a bit of this other kind of corally darkish pink as well, because I didn't have that much pink left in the shades that I was looking at, and some green. So I just kind of alternated. So each time I advanced the quilt to the next throat space, I would change the color. And I also mostly stuck to the sort of 2.5-inch strips. I did do some thinner ones when I was running out of the right colors. and then the larger chunks of fabric. So, and I just tried to be as consistent as I could. All right, I'm going to stick a bit of music on for anyone who wants to watch a little more of the process before you see the rest of the quilt. But if you'd rather skip ahead, there's timestamps in the description. When you see a little piece of blue paper while I'm quilting, that's my son giving me the running order list for a monster truck tournament that was going on behind me while I was quilting. So that's got nothing to do with what I'm doing on the quilt, just so you know. Okay, I'll catch you at the end. And so here it is, finally finished. It measured out in the end about 85 by 95. So I think is that like a full double kind of quilt size. It's pretty big compared to what I normally make. I normally make a throw size. I'm pleasantly surprised by how it turned out, I've got to be honest, not being able to really see what the whole thing looked like throughout because I was working a throat space at a time. So this wasn't planned. I didn't have a layout. I hadn't sketched it ahead of time, anything like that. So it was just kind of playing it by ear and alternating the colors as I went. And again, using fabrics that maybe I wouldn't normally use. And I actually quite like it. I would never set out to make a quilt with all these flowers and appliques and things that look like this, but I like it more than I thought I would. So it was a fun exercise for me. If you want to see my next Quilt-As-You-Go on a long arm, then do subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this one. The next one's going to be way more modern. It's going to be almost like the opposite of this. So anyway, I hope you'll come back and check that out. Thanks so much for spending time with me. Bye.